Let's bring in CBSN political contributor and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez. Also with a CBSN political contributor, Democratic strategist and Sirius XM director of progressive programming, Zerlina Maxwell. Welcome back to both of you.
Thank you.
Leslie, first, what did you make of Mr. Kazowitz's statements?
I think it went exactly where we anticipated. It was going to be that politics of personal destruction, try to undermine the credibility of a very damaging testimony that came from Comey, particularly as it relates to a couple of things. One is that he called the president a liar, basically. But two, it got out the message the president was very concerned about, that he was not the focus of the Russian investigation.
The politics of personal destruction doesn't get much more personal than two guys just calling each other liars today.
Right. You know, it's he said, and that's always going to be tricky. But I think that Comey has some things on his side. He told other people in the FBI, the senior leadership team, as he articulated today, what was going on at the time. And so those people also have integrity, and their credibility is also going to be on the line when they're asked about this by former Director Mueller.
Before we talk more about the sort of fierce personal accusations that have gone on here today, it's worth talking about the civility of this hearing as well, which went on time, which ended on time. We didn't hear a whole lot of fire from some of the senators, less so than we heard yesterday when they asked other questions. And even Senator McCain, who participated in this, is not on the Intelligence Committee but did participate, just released a statement which I think is remarkable in some ways. He said, "I get the sense from Twitter that my line of questioning today went over people's heads. Maybe going forward, I shouldn't stay up late watching the Diamondbacks night games." He said he's trying to get to the question of whether obstruction of justice took place. He said, "I still believe this question is important. I intend to submit it in writing." So John McCain's asking for a mulligan, a little bit, over today's hearing. Right. Do you think any other senators are doing that right now?
Not at all. I think, if anything, they did a very good job. There was not this grandstanding. There wasn't this anger and hostility that you saw toward the subject, like yesterday when the intelligence officers were up there basically saying nothing. Again, Comey came across as a sympathetic character, very honest, very trustworthy, a flawed man to some extent, not a lot of hubris, saying, "I didn't know. I did the best I could at the time." People will fault him for that. People will fault him for poor judgment and the decisions he made. But it was very hard I think the leadership did a very good job of keeping everybody moving in that process, and it illuminated quite a bit.
And a refreshing change from what we saw yesterday.
Yes,
right? I mean, completely different.
Right, but I think that yesterday what was so frustrating, not just for the people, the folks on the committee, but also for the public, was that they agreed to come and testify under the assumption that they're going to say something. And then didn't give a real good reason
about why they weren't going to say something.
And I think that, you know, when you're falling back on, well, I don't feel like that would be appropriate, that's not an answer. When you're under oath and in front of a Senate committee, you are there to be candid and forthcoming in the parameters of what's allowable under the conditions that are agreed to before you go in the room. And so I think that yesterday to show up and just basically filibuster and not say anything was so frustrating.
It's interesting because it did fill in a lot of gaps. Right. It creates more questions, but it fills in gaps in terms of mapping the sausage making that goes on at the FBI and how they're conducting these investigations, but more so the process by which he felt he needed to take contemporaneous notes, contact or not contact his superiors. These were all, I think he wanted very thorough explanations.
And it's a window into the map of James Comey's conflicted mind when he's talking in the J. Edgar Hoover bite in particular. You know, he's running over this in his head as he's speaking to the president, saying, well, should I be saying this? Well, maybe he's thinking this right now. Right. I think a lot of those questions are what led them this to start last summer. That is when he made the Hillary Clinton announcement and then felt compelled to make further announcements. But to see some of the acknowledgments that James Comey Zerlina made, whether it was regarding the transparency of the leak and naming who he offered this information to, the amount of detail and layering that we got beyond the statement yesterday was pretty remarkable.
Right. Well, he's a private citizen now, and so he can really talk about a lot more than he could when he was director of the FBI, and you have very strict rules about what you can talk about, particularly if he's heading up in an ongoing investigation. But now he's retired, essentially, right until he's in between opportunities, is actually how he described it. But I think that as a private citizen, he is allowed to call a reporter and give them information about a story that the reporter is working on. That's how journalism works now. And I think that, you know, to characterize it in the way that Mark Kasowitz did as something inappropriate was a little bit off the mark. It was a little bit cherry picking in my opinion.
Well, he's retired, but he's also still very interested in defining his legacy.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, sure. So
absolutely.
I mean, the gloves were off and the shoes were kicked off too. So it was a little bit looser in terms of disclosing, and exactly right, reflecting upon his legacy, his reputation. And those were all with merit. The leak issue, though, is going to continue to be a talking point and a focus of Republicans because it has been a consternation to much of the administration. And nobody likes that. And you're going to see, you already see the attacks from the Republican Party that Comey's against leaks until he's for them. And he's making those judgment calls independently. He did not go to his superiors. He was, even as a private citizen, he has a responsibility, some would argue, to protect the integrity of an ongoing investigation. And
a responsibility to release that information if he felt like the information that was coming out of the White House about why he was fired was inaccurate.
Well, okay, so at the worst,
or
you say
lies,
it's self-serving. It's self-serving. I want to protect my reputation. I want to get an independent in here. I mean, gloves are off type of mano-a-mano combat versus and then try to hold yourself to some sort of standard as the standard bearer for making judgments independently and, you know, being the savior of the Justice Department. It's a long reach.
As a former Hillary Clinton staffer, I agree with you on that. There's definitely some moments in Comey's career where he is self-serving, he is self-righteous, he cares very much about his integrity and his reputation, and so his actions actually align with those beliefs that he has about himself. He holds himself to a very high regard. And he clearly,
he holds himself to a high regard, but he also has enormous respect for those who work for him and have worked for him. You heard Ricky, who knows him very well. You also heard Ron Hosko, who has great respect for him. But they also acknowledge that some of these complications that cropped up last summer then snowballed to a certain extent, and we're still witnessing the full results of now. If we are to hear more from the president and not just his attorney, he's going to tweet again. Sure. At some point, for sure.
And it's about to happen.
What do you expect to hear, and what do you want to hear?
Well, there's a countdown clock, I'm sure, that people are just, you know, waging money on. There's a clock in Vegas, so we're just to see what the odds are right now. But
7 p.m.
7 p.m. 7:45.
5 a.m.
5 a.m. midnight, as Gayle King just alluded to. But you know, who really knows? In all seriousness, the president does respond. It would be out of character for the president not to respond to such a big event, an event at the least to say he's been vindicated and now he sees that he's a source of these leaks. That really speaks to the base. There are many base Republicans who continue to feel that this is something conjured up by the Democrats, and they would say the media. They buy into that line of argument. So it was imperative that Comey comes across as a credible, balanced witness. And it's going to be mixed. I think he's now being lumped into the whole D.C. establishment. At least that's what the defense is going to try to do.
Zerlina?
They're trying to do it. I don't know that they have enough credibility or facts on their side. I mean, I think that when you look at what Mark Kasowitz came out and said, he picked two things out of Comey's testimony today to say, look, that vindicates our guy. And so that, you know, you can't cherry pick. And certainly when you're talking about a special prosecutor, they're going to look at all the facts. They're going to interview all of the witnesses and turn over every rock. And so that's going to be a problem. And certainly you can't cherry pick and make that your defense when you're talking about a special prosecutor doing a very thorough investigation.
All right. We're going to take a quick break here. Leslie Sanchez, Zerlina Maxwell, thank you very much.